They called it the choosing, and my council had spent a full year arranging it, and I had spent that same year dreading the night it would finally come. 12, Counselor Harn told me, as though the number itself were a gift he was laying at my feet. He stood at my shoulder on the high dais while, far below, the great iron-bound doors of Verath were unbarred. 12 daughters of 12 holds, my king, each one raised for a Luna's seat, each one worthy. You need only sit and look and choose. By the time the last of them has crossed the floor, Highfell will have its queen and the north will have its heir before another winter is out. I said nothing. I had learned, across the gray years of my reign, that saying nothing spared me a great deal of saying things I would regret. Below us the hall was lit past all reason. Every sconce along the walls had been filled and set burning. Every candle tree in Verath had been dragged out of storage and crowded onto the flags. The long feasting tables had been pushed back against the stone, so that the whole floor of the hall lay open and bare, a road of gray stone running from the doors to my chair. The banners of Highfell hung down from the black rafters, the silver wolf on slate, stirring a little in the heat rising off all those flames. And beneath them my pack had gathered thick as a winter forest. The highborn pressed to the front in their furs and their jewels. The common folk crowded behind and up into the galleries, all of them come to watch their king be handed a wife the way a hound is handed a bone at the end of a hunt. I sat in the old black chair my father had died in, and his father before him, and I watched the doors swing wide, and I thought, not for the first time and not for the last, that a king is the least free man in his own kingdom. I was 11 years alone by then. Not lonely, I want to be careful with the word, because for a long time I would not have admitted to lonely. Alone. My mother had been the Luna of Highfell, and when she died the seat beside mine went cold and stayed cold, and I had let it, because I had watched what her death did to my father, how a man can be broken not by war or by winter but simply by an empty chair at his right hand, and I had decided, in the cold clear way a young king decides things, that I would not be broken so. I would rule. I would keep the passes fed and the borders whole and the pack strong, and I would not want anything I could lose. That had been the whole of my philosophy for 11 years, and it had worked in the way that a splint works. It holds the thing together and it lets you walk, and it is not the same as being healed. The council had not asked me whether I wished to marry. They had asked me to reign, and reigning meant an heir, and an heir meant a Luna, and so the choosing had been arranged around me, the way a house is built around a stubborn old tree. Because I would not move, they had simply built the thing anyway and left me sitting in the middle of it. The first, Harn announced, and his warm, practiced voice rolled out over the hall and quieted it. Seraphine of Dunkero. She came across the floor like a swan across still water. I will not pretend she was not beautiful. She was, in the particular flawless way of a woman who has been prepared. Her gown was the deep blue of the Dunkero hills, and her dark hair had been dressed with river pearl, strand upon strand of it, and she crossed the whole length of that open floor without once looking down at her own feet, which is harder than it sounds and speaks of years of learning. She stopped at the foot of my dais and made me a bow so slow and so graceful that it must have cost a season's practice, and then she lifted her eyes to mine. They were lovely eyes. I looked into them for the length of a breath and found nothing in them that was meant for me, only the seat behind me, the crown of the north, the long climb her house had made across generations to put a daughter on this floor. She was not cold. She was simply aimed. Everything about her had been aimed at this moment and this chair for the whole of her life, and I was, to her, the last locked door between her house and the throne, and she was here to be the key. "My king," she said. "You are welcome in Verath," I answered, because it was true, and because it was all I honestly had to give her. Harn made a small, satisfied sound behind me, the sound of a man watching his year of careful work begin at last to pay. And then, at my other side, the second thing my council had arranged for that night stirred, and lifted his great gray head, and the whole front of the hall went still. Ash. He was the oldest wolf in all Highfell, and the largest I had ever seen or heard tell of a gray going to white along the muzzle now. A beast very nearly the size of a yearling colt, who had walked at my side since I was a boy, and at my father's side before that. There is a law in the North older than any hold or any council, older than the crown itself, that the pack's great wolf knows the true Luna before any man does, that he will go to her and lie down at her feet, and by that the whole pack, and through the pack the whole kingdom, knows the choosing is real and blessed. My council had brought Ash up onto the dais to bless the match. It was meant to be a formality. It was meant, if I am honest, to be theater. A bit of old ceremony to reassure the holds that their king's marriage carried the pack's ancient sanction. Ash had not gone to anyone in 11 years, not since my mother died and the seat beside mine went cold, and Harn had reasoned sensibly enough, I will grant him, that a wolf who chose no one could hardly be expected to object to whomever his king chose. Ash looked at Seraphine of Dunkero for a long, considering moment. Then he laid his great head back down upon his paws and closed his eyes, and there was a ripple of nervous laughter through the front of the crowd, and Harn cleared his throat rather too loudly and called the second name. Amarillo of the Ashwood. She was fire where the first had been water. Copper-haired, lean as a hunter, quick to smile. She crossed the floor at a pace that told the whole hall she feared nothing in it, least of all its king, and she looked up at me with something close to amusement in her face, which was nearer to honest than anything I had yet been offered that night, and I found I could not dislike her for it. She spoke, unprompted, of her father's timberlands and of the 3 seasons she herself had led the Ashwood hunts, and she meant it as a boast, and I heard it as one and thought, she will make some fortunate man a fierce and loyal wife, and she will lead his hunts and hold his hall against any enemy, and she does not love me and never will, and that is no fault of hers. Ash did not open his eyes. Brielle of Stonewater, a girl so young that I felt the years between us like a cold draught under a door. She trembled through the whole of her bow, and her voice shook when she gave me her name, and I gentled my own voice as much as I could for her, and was quietly glad when she was permitted to step back into the crowd. Her father had sent a child to court a king. I marked his name, and not kindly. Ussold of the Marches, tall, cool, gray-eyed, older than the rest by some years and unbothered by it. She made her bow correctly, and then, instead of the practiced pretty words, she looked me full in the face and asked me, the only one of the 12 who asked me anything at all, how many winters the northern passes had gone hungry in the last decade, and whether I meant to do anything about it before the next one came. It was a good question. It was a ruler's question, the kind my own council too rarely asked. I answered her honestly, and we spoke for a moment about grain stores and the mountain roads, and I thought, here at least is a mind. Ash slept through the whole of it, but I remembered her, and it mattered later that I did. They came and they came. The 5th, the 6th, the 7th. I lost the individual shape of them after a while. If I am to be truthful, one blue gown bled into the next green one flawless slow bow into the next, one pair of lovely aimed eyes fixed on the chair behind me into the next pair. My council had cast a wide net across the whole of the North and hauled up its daughters, and every single one of them had been taught since childhood how to walk this precise floor, and make this precise bow, and say these precise words. And not one of them, not one, so much as glanced at the woman moving quietly along the edge of the hall with a heavy clay jug of wine cradled in her arms. I did not glance at her either. That is the shame I have carried out of that night and will carry to the end of my days. She had been there the entire time. I noticed her the way a man notices a thing his eye has been resting on for a while without his knowing it. The 7th bride was mid-bow, some daughter of some hold whose name I could not now recover if my life turned on it, and my gaze slid past her bare shoulder, and there was a girl in a plain gray servant's kirtle, filling a counselor's cup at the near table. Her head was bent to the work. Her sleeves were pushed up past her elbows. A single strand of dark hair had come loose from her plait and lay against her cheek, and she did not push it back, because both her hands were full and the work was more important than the hair. She poured the wine to exactly the right height, not a finger over, and drew the heavy jug back without spilling a single drop, and moved on to the next cup, quiet as weather, unhurried, entirely certain that no one in the whole blazing hall was looking at her, because no one ever had. I looked back at the seventh bride and, a moment later, could not have told you the servant's face if you had held a blade to my throat, but I had seen her. Some deep part of me had catalogued her the way a man half asleep catalogues a sound in another room, and filed it away, and the filed thing sat there quietly while the eighth bride crossed the floor, and the ninth. Isura of the Fenlands, Harn called, and I thought, with the particular gray exhaustion of a man nearing the end of a long and pointless duty, 3 more, and then I will have done the thing they need me to do. I will name one of these worthy strangers. Highfell will have its Luna, and the holds will be satisfied, and I will go back to being alone in a full hall for the rest of my natural life, which is a thing a king learns how to do. That was the exact moment Ash stood up. He did it slowly, the way very old wolves do, gathering his great legs beneath him one at a time, and the whole hall marked it at once and fell silent, because he had not risen from that dais for anything in 11 years but his own hunger. Harn actually smiled. I saw it out of the corner of my eye, a smile of pure and total relief, because here at last was the pack's great wolf rising to bless a match, and Isra of the Fenland stood frozen and radiant at the foot of my dais, certain beyond all doubt that the North's own wolf was about to come down and lie at her feet and make her, in front of the whole gathered kingdom, its queen. Ash walked past her as though she were a stone pillar. He came down off the dais, slow, deliberate, his claws clicking on the flags, and I felt the whole crowd pull back from him, a soft collective intake of breath, because a wolf that sighs loose and purposeful in a packed hall is a fearful thing. And he crossed the open floor, that whole lit road of gray stone that the 12 had walked, and he did not hurry and he did not wander, and he did not so much as turn his head. He went straight, the way a hound goes to a scent it has hunted its whole life and lost, past the frozen Isura, past the pressed ranks of the highborn in their furs, past the counselors and their brimming cups, all the way to the shadowed edge of the hall where the servant stood back against the cold stone wall, waiting to be needed and hopping not to be noticed. And he lay down at the feet of the girl in the gray kirtle, and he laid his great white muzzle across the toes of her worn shoes, and he let out a long, shuddering sigh, the kind of sigh I had not heard from him since my mother was alive to scratch behind his ears, and he closed his eyes, as though he had at last, after a very long journey, arrived somewhere he could rest. The heavy jug slipped in her hands. She caught it against her body before it could fall, and she stood there, absolutely still, staring down at the enormous gray wolf who had just crossed the whole of the king's hall to lie upon her feet, and then she looked up. Not at me. She did not know yet to look at me. She looked around at the sudden ringing silence, and at the hundreds upon hundreds of faces, all turned toward her at once, and I watched fear go through her whole body, the pure animal fear of a servant who has, through no act of her own, become the single most visible person in a room full of her betters, every one of whom outranks her, any one of whom could have her whipped for a spilled drop. "Get that beast away from the help," said Harn, and his smooth voice cracked in a way I had never once heard it crack in 11 years. "Someone, you girl, step away from him. Step away." She tried. I want that remembered above everything else about her because it is the whole of who she is. She tried to obey. She lifted one foot slowly so as not to startle the great beast, to step back out from under Ash's heavy head, and the old wolf made a sound low in his chest. Not a growl, nothing so crude or so simple. A long, grieving, rising note, like the sound of a door that has been shut and barred for many years being asked, at last, to open. And he pressed his weight down across her feet, and would not let her go. And then the pups came. I had not known there were pups in the hall. There should not have been. A choosing is no place for them. But a hold in a hard winter is full of orphaned litters that no one has time to see to, and the kitchens are warm and the scraps are there. And I learned later, much later, from her own mouth, in a cold kennel in the dead of the year, that Nell had been feeding 6 of them all winter out of her own share, 6 half-starved little things that not another soul in Verath had troubled to keep alive. And the moment the great gray wolf claimed her before the whole north, all 6 came boiling out from under the servants' benches at once and swarmed up around her ankles, climbing at her skirts, yipping, frantic, and one of them fought its way up into her arms. And she caught it without thinking, without deciding, the way you catch a thing you have caught 100 times before, and held it against her, and it pressed its small face into the warmth of her throat. And the whole vast, arranged, ruinously expensive theater of my choosing came quietly to pieces on the floor of my own hall. I stood. I did not decide to stand. I want to be honest about the whole of that night, and so I will be honest about this above all. I did not weigh it. I did not consider what the 12 holds would say, or what my counsel had spent, or what a king may and may not do before the assembled lords of his realm. I stood, and I came down off the dais, and the crowd parted in front of me the way water parts before the prow of a ship, and I crossed the same road of stone that Ash had crossed. And with every step I took, the noise of that vast, crowded, blazing hall dropped further and further away, until I have no better words for it, though I have spent a lifetime hunting them until there was nothing left of it at all. No council, no banners, no 12 daughters of 12 holds. Only the girl at the edge of my hall with a pup pressed to her throat and an old gray wolf across her feet, and the sound of her breathing, which I could somehow hear the whole way across all that stone, as though her breath were the only breath drawn in all the north. I stopped an arm's length from her. Ash thumped his heavy tail against the flags once and did not move. Close she was nothing like the 12 had been. Her hands were red and chapped from work. There was flour, dried pale and forgotten, along the inside of one wrist. She was not dressed to be looked at, and had plainly never once in her life expected to be, and her eyes, when at last she raised them to me, because a king was standing over her now and there was simply nowhere else left in the world to look. Her eyes were the deep brown of turned spring earth, and they were steady even through her fear, and they held me. Not the seat behind me, not the crown, me. She looked at the man and not at the king, because she did not know how to do the other thing. No one had ever taught her. There had never been any reason to teach a kitchen girl how to look at a throne, and it undid 11 years of me in the space of a single breath. "My king," she said, very low, so low I think I was the only one who heard it. "I didn't call him. I swear it on my life. I don't know why he would." "What is your name?" I asked her. She swallowed. The pup burrowed further under her chin. "Nell," she said. "Nell," I said, and I felt the single small word settle down into me and take root, the way a word does when it turns out to be the one you were always going to have to learn. "Whose daughter?" And there was the first hairline crack in the whole hidden thing, though I did not yet know it for what it was. She flinched, only slightly, a shadow crossing her face like a cloud crossing a field, and she said, "No one's my king, I'm from the kitchens. I've always been from the kitchens." "That is not what I asked you," I said, as gently as I have ever said anything to any living soul. Behind me, the hall had begun to find its voice again. A low, rising mutter, the sound of many hundreds of people all discovering at once that they had a great deal to say. I heard Harn somewhere in it, insisting that the wolf was old, the wolf was addled, the wolf could not be permitted to overthrow a year of careful statecraft, and a hall full of honored highborn guests on a whim. I heard the father of Seraphine of Dunkero, a lord with a famous temper, demanding to be told what game was being played here at his daughter's expense. And I heard the word disgrace travel the length of the room the way a struck spark travels through dry autumn grass, catching and spreading. I turned around. I have ruled Highfell for 11 years, and one of the few useful things I have learned in that time is that there is a particular way of turning to face a room that ends its noise, and I used it now. The hall went quiet. Hundreds of faces, and every single one of them waiting to see whether their king would be ruled by his council's careful year of work, or by an old gray wolf who had crossed a floor. "Counselor Harn," I said, and my voice carried without my raising it, "you told me not an hour past on this very dais in front of all these witnesses that the North's great wolf knows the true Luna before any man does. You told it to me as ancient law. You brought Ash up here to bless my choosing." I let that sit in the silence a moment. "He has blessed it." "My king," Harn's face had gone the gray of cold ash. That is a servant, a pourer of wine. She has no house, no name, no blood, no." "She has a name," I said. "It is Nell. And you will find, counselor, that the ancient law you invoked so gladly when it suited your arrangements does not stop being law merely because it has chosen someone your net did not think to catch." There was a swell then from the 12, from the fathers of the 12 mostly, a low roar of outrage, and I understood it, and I did not blame them for it. They had come a very long way. They had spent a very great deal, and they had just been made to look like fools in front of the whole assembled North by an old wolf and a kitchen girl, and no proud man forgives that quickly or easily. But understanding a thing is not the same as yielding to it. I had put myself between them and Nell without ever deciding to. My body stood square between the girl and the whole outraged hall, and Ash rose again from her feet and came to stand at my side, facing them, his hackles up along his spine, the old fierce beast of Heifel who had not troubled to defend anything at all in 11 years. And the fathers of the 12 looked at that wolf, and at the set of my shoulders, and thought better of whatever they had been on the point of doing. "This is not finished," said the Lord of Dunkero, low and hard. "No," I agreed. "It is only beginning, but you are all my guests here tonight, and you will be honored as my guests, and you will go home in the morning with the gifts due your houses and my true thanks for your daughters, who are worthy women, every one of them, and worthy of far better than being paraded down a hall like fine mares at a spring fair. Which was my council's doing, and my own folly for permitting it, and I ask their pardon for it now, before all of you." I meant that, and they heard that I meant it, and some of the heat went out of the room, because there is nothing that cools an honest anger faster than being honestly met. But the Luna's seat of Heifel is not a prize to be awarded to the best rehearsed beau. It is a bond. And tonight, in front of every one of you, the bond has spoken. You saw it speak with your own eyes. I turned back to Nell. She was staring at me with an expression I have never in all the years since been able to forget, not joy, not triumph, nothing that a song or a story would think to give her in that moment. Terror. Plain, undisguised terror, and beneath it a kind of grief, as though I had just done to her something enormous and irreversible that she had never asked for and could never now undo. She was shaking. The pup had gone very still against her, the way small creatures go still when they sense fear in the one who holds them. "My king," she whispered, "please, please, I don't know how to be. I pour the wine. That's all I am, that's all I've ever been. If you do this, I'll have no peace, not for a single day. They'll say I schemed for it. They'll say I set the wolf on somehow, that I witched him, and I didn't." Her voice broke clean in half. "Send me back to the kitchens, I'm begging you. Let me be no one again. I was happy being no one. I know how to be no one. I don't know how to be this. And I will tell you what it was that stopped me from doing the thing a lesser man, or a more selfish one, might have done in that moment, from simply overruling her the way I had just overruled my entire council. It was the flower on her wrist. It was the half-starved pup she had kept alive all winter out of her own bowl while lords feasted 20 feet away and never saw. It was that she had spent the whole of this long, blazing night at the very edge of my hall, unseen, doing her small work well and asking nothing of anyone. And now that the entire crushing weight of the North had fallen on her without warning, the only thing she could think to ask for was to be let go quietly back to the quiet. I knelt. An alpha king does not kneel. It is very nearly the whole of what it means to be one, that he does not kneel to anyone ever. The hall drew its breath as one body. I did not care in the slightest. I went down on one knee there on the cold flags in front of the girl in the gray kirtle, so that she was looking down at me now instead of up, so that the crown was below her and the man was where she could reach him. And I said quietly, meaning it for her ears and no others, "Then I will not do it. Not tonight. Not by decree, not while you are afraid, not for any reason at all until you wish it. The wolf has chosen, and I believe him because I have believed him my whole life long, and he has never once in all that time been wrong. But you have not chosen, and I would sooner rule alone another 11 years, and another 11 after that, than take a Luna who was hunted and harried into her own seat like a doe into a snare." I looked up at her. "So here is what I ask of you, and it is only this. Not marriage. Not tonight, not this season, not until you say the word yourself and mean it. Only let me learn your name past the sound of it. Let me find out whose daughter you truly are, since you plainly know and will not say. Stay here in Verath, not in the kitchens, but as my honored guest and under my own protection, so that no soul in this hall or any hold in the north can lay a hand or so much as a hard word on you and go unanswered. And when you have come to know me, if you ever come to know me and find in me anything at all that a good woman might think worth choosing, then you choose, or you do not. And if you do not, then I will send you wherever in the wide north your heart wishes to go, with gold enough to live out your days as no one in peace. And I give you my word as king, and as a man that I will never trouble you again." I held out my hand, palm turned up open, not reaching for her, only offering. "That is the whole of it, nothing hidden in it. Will you stay?" She looked at my open hand for a long, long time. The hall did not breathe. Then she shifted the pup up onto her hip to free her hand, and she put her red, flour-dusted, work-roughened palm down into my open one, of her own will, and closed her fingers around mine. And the bond, which the old wolf had known from the first breath she took in my hall, and which I had been too proud and too tired and too long-splinted to hear, the bond went through me like the first warmth of a fire reaching hands that have been cold so long they had forgotten they could feel anything at all. Not a mark, not a blaze of light, nothing the songs would know what to do with. Only warmth, arriving all at once in a body that had stopped, years ago, expecting ever to be warm, spreading out from the place where her hand held mine, outward and outward through every cold and hollow year of me, until I understood, kneeling there on the stone, that I had not truly been alone in a full hall for 11 years so much as I had been waiting, without ever once knowing that I was waiting, for a girl to pour the wine right and feed the pups that no one fed, and at the last put her hand in mine because she chose to. "I'll stay," Nell said. Her voice was unsteady but her eyes were level. "Until I know you. That's all I'm promising, that's all." "That is all I asked for," I said and rose. And it was the truest thing I had said in the whole of that long, false, blazing night. She did not sleep in the kitchens again, though she tried to, twice, out of pure force of habit, and both times my steward found her before dawn scrubbing pots she had no earthly need to scrub, and had to gently turn her around and walk her back to rooms she did not believe were hers. They gave her the east rooms, the good ones, the ones that catch the morning sun full across the floor. She stood in the middle of the first of them that first evening as though the empty space itself were an accusation aimed at her. "This is more room than my whole family had," she said, low, more to herself than to me. And then she went white to the lips, because she had said family, out loud in front of the king, and she knew that I had heard it. I did not press her on it. I had given her my word that I would learn whose daughter she was, and I meant to keep it, but I meant to earn the knowing and not wring it out of her like water from a cloth. So I learned the smaller things first, and let the large one wait. I learned that she woke before the sun no matter how deep and soft the bed they put her in, because the habit of work had been cut too deep into her to be lifted out in a season, or perhaps in a lifetime. I learned that she could not sit idle and would not be waited upon, and that if you gave her nothing at all to do, she would go and find the pups and do for them instead. So at last I stopped fighting it and simply had the 6 pups brought up to the solar. And so we spent the long gray afternoons of that hard winter, she and I and 6 growing wolves and 1 very old one, while the snow came silently down past the tall windows, she mending something with her clever red hands, I pretending to read the reports from the hungry passes, Ash asleep with his great head across her feet where it now seemed always to be. And it was, I did not have the word for it at first. I had gone without the thing so long that I had lost the word too. It was peace. It was the very peace I had watched the 12 brides walk gravely toward down the length of my hall, and had found in not one of them, and it had been standing at the edge of the room pouring my wine the whole time. I learned that she was kind in the specific, costly, difficult way, not the easy way that costs the giver nothing. There was a kitchen boy who had been beaten for the crockery broken on the night of the choosing, when the pups came boiling out and a shelf of cups went over. She found it out. She still knew everything that happened below stairs. She would to the end of her life. And she went down to the head cook, and she did not pull rank, because she did not believe for one moment that she had any rank to pull. She stood in that hot, low kitchen, where a month before she had been the least of all its souls, and she said, quietly, that she would take the blame and the cost of the broken crockery on herself. And the cook, who had known her for years as one of his own and had watched a wolf make her a queen and had not known what on earth to do about it, was so moved and so ashamed by the offer that he forgave the boy on the spot and would not hear another word of it. I heard the whole of it from my steward days later. Nell never told me. She never told me a single one of the good things she did. I had to gather them the way a man gathers fallen apples in a wet orchard, one bruised sweet thing at a time, stooping. I learned that she laughed rarely, and that when she did it was low and warm and entirely without guard, and that I would have done a great many foolish things to hear it. And I learned slowly, over that whole white winter, that the great gray wolf and the 6 pups had only ever been the smallest beginning of it. It was not only Ash, it was not only the 6, it was every wolf in Highfell. The great wild pack that ranged the hills below Verath, that answered to no man, that barely answered to me, their alpha, and to me only in the oldest and most reluctant way. They began to come down to the walls when she walked them in the thin winter light. I would stand at a window and watch her small dark figure move along the battlements, and watch the wild wolves gather in the snow below her, silent, their breath smoking, their yellow eyes turned up, 40 of them, 50, come out of the deep hills for no reason under heaven but that she was up there. The war wolves in the kennels, the ones the handlers would only approach in pairs, with chains and long caution, would gentle at the mere sound of her voice through the door, would lie down and roll and whine like pups the moment she came near. And once in the deepest and hardest heart of that winter, a she-wolf we prized went into a bad whelping, a birth gone crossways, and the beast half-mad with the pain of it, and we had given her and her whole unborn litter up for dead, because not one handler in Verath could get near enough to help without losing a hand. And that she-wolf lived. Her whole litter lived. Because Nell went out into the freezing kennel in the black middle of the night, when no living person could get within 10 feet of the maddened animal, and knelt down in the bloody straw beside her, and sang to her. Sang. I stood in the kennel doorway with a lantern, and I listened to a girl I had found pouring wine at the edge of my hall sing a mad and dying wolf back across the very threshold of death, in a low old language I did not know a single word of, an ancient melody with something in its shape that was older than Highfell, older than the crown, older than the stone Verath was raised on. And I felt the hair stand up all along my arms. And I understood at last and completely exactly what Ash had understood in the space of a single breath on the night. He crossed my whole hall to lie at her feet. "Where did you learn that song?" I said quietly, when it was done, when the she-wolf lay sleeping and clean and her whole litter had found the teat and was nursing in a warm blind row, and Nell was wiping the blood from her hands on a fistful of straw as though she had done nothing more remarkable than wash a cup. She did not look up at me. For a long moment she did not answer at all. "My grandmother," she said finally. "She used to sing it before." "Before what, Nell?" And this time she did not turn the question aside. She had been in Verath a full season by then. She had, I think, come to know me a little in that time, as she had promised on the night of the choosing that she would try to. and she sat back on her heels in the straw with the sleeping wolves warm all around her, and she looked up at me in the lantern light, and she told me. Her grandmother had been the last of the wolf singers of Heifel. I had always thought the wolf singers a legend, a thing for the nursery. Every child of the North is told of them, the old line, older even than the alphas, who did not master the wolves by strength or by fear the way a king does, but gentled them by blood and by voice, who walked in among the wildest beasts of the deep hills unarmed and unafraid, who, the old stories swore, could ask a wolf to lie down at their feet and simply be obeyed. The songs called them the pack's true keepers, the ones who in the first days, before ever there were kings or holds or crowns, kept the wolves and the wolf kind gently bound together, so that the two peoples of the North were one people. And the song said the line had died out generations upon generations ago. In some old and shameful betrayal, I had never troubled myself to learn the shape of their houses broken, their names struck clean from every roll and record, their surviving children scattered to the winds and hidden away and taught to forget forever what blood they carried. Because a line that the wolves themselves will follow is a line that a jealous king has cause to fear. My grandmother hid us in the kitchens of the great holds, Nell said. Her voice was steady, but her red hands were not. Different holds, different names, moving on before anyone looked too long. It's the safest place in all the world to hide a child, she used to say, because no one ever looks at the help. No one in 100 years has ever once looked hard at the girl who pours the wine. She made me swear it when I was small. Never sing where a soul could hear me. Never, never let the wolves come to me where a lord or a lady might see it happen. Never tell one living person whose blood I carried in me. Because the last king in the North who found out there was still a wolf singer breathing under his roof had her taken out and drowned in a weighted sack, for fear of what the pack might do if it learned she was there. She lifted her eyes to mine, and there was no fear left in them now, only a terrible, bone-deep, weary honesty. That's whose daughter I am, my king. That is why I begged you, that first night, to send me back to the kitchens and let me be no one. It was never the broken crockery I was afraid of. It was this. This is the very thing my grandmother spent the whole of her life keeping me alive to hide, and your wolf dragged it into the middle of your hall, in front of the entire assembled North, in the space of a single breath. I knelt down in the straw with her, there among the sleeping wolves, and I set the lantern aside. Nell, I said, listen to me now, because I am going to say this once plainly, in the way a king says the things he means to be held to by God and by his own dead. No one is going to drown you. No one is going to break your house, or strike your name from anything, or so much as look at you sideways in my hall and keep his teeth. You are not the last shameful secret of a dead and buried line, hiding for her life in my kitchens. I reached out and took her hands, the red, clever, blood-flecked hands that had just sung a dying wolf and her whole litter back into the world. You are the wolf singer of Heifel. You are the thing the North lost so long ago that it forgot even how to grieve for you. My wolf did not choose a servant by mistake, or by the addling of old age, whatever my counsel would like to believe. He knew you the very instant you crossed the threshold of my hall, because his kind have been waiting patiently, faithfully, for 100 years and more for your kind to come home to them. The choosing was never mine to make. It was his. It always was from the first. All those months my counsel spent arranging 12 brides, and the true Luna was already in the hall the whole time, feeding his pups out of her own bowl. She was weeping by then, silently, in the way of people who have taught themselves from childhood never once to be heard doing it. They'll hate me, she whispered. The council, the holds, a wolf singer on the Luna's seat of Heifel, they'll say I'll turn the whole pack against you the day I please. They'll say I'm exactly the danger their grandfathers drowned. They'll never kneel to me, Verk, not in 100 years. It was the first time she had used my name. I noticed it even then, even through everything, the way you notice a single warm thread run through cold cloth. Then let them say it, I told her. Let them say every word of it, out loud in full council where I can hear them, and then let them stand in that kennel doorway where I just stood, and watch you sing a dying litter into the world when not one of their handlers dared go near. And then let them explain to me, if they can find the breath for it, why the North was ever the better off for having you scrubbing their pots. I will not pretend to you that the holds bowed easily, or quickly, or well. Pride does not bow easily, and the pride of the 12 had been very badly bruised on the night of the choosing, and bruised pride is the slowest of all things to heal. There were letters, cold ones, careful ones, some of them very nearly threats dressed up in the language of concern. There were slights, small and studied, at every gathering that whole long winter and into the thaw. A lord who was slow to rise, a lady whose bow to knell was a hair too shallow to answer for, and a hair too deep to punish. And there was one long, ugly stretch of the late winter when Councillor Harn, who had, I have come to believe, half convinced himself by then that I had been ensorcelled outright. So far outside the neat lines of his year of arrangements had the whole business fallen. When Harn quietly gathered the most discontented of the lords to him, and came to me, and put it to me formally, in full and open council, that the kitchen witch should be sent away with a purse for her silence and the choosing done again, properly in the spring. I let him finish. I have always held that a man should be permitted to finish his say, all of it, so that he can never afterward tell himself or anyone else that he was silenced before he was heard. So I sat, and I let Harn lay out the whole of it, the danger of a wolf singer's power over the pack, the insult to the 12 loyal holds, the peril to the succession, the whispering that had already begun to spread through the lower halls that their king was bewitched. He spoke well. He believed every word of it. When he had finished, the discontented lords behind him murmured their agreement, and the council chamber was very quiet, and every eye came to rest on me to see how the king would answer his oldest and most trusted counselor. I did not answer him. I sent for Nell. She came into the council chamber in a plain dark gown. She would never be talked into finery, not that winter and not in all the years to come, and I had long since given up the trying, with Ash packing at her side and 2 of the grown pups, gangling and enormous now, ambling at her heels. And the assembled lords of the North, who had come there that day to demand her quiet removal, watched the great gray wolf of Heifel cross the length of the council floor and lie down at her feet as easily and as naturally as drawing breath, and the 2 young wolves settled to either side of her like a guard, and something went out of the room. Some certainty, some heat. She did not sing. She did not need to. She simply stood there, quiet and steady, the flower long gone from her wrists by then, but the deep steadiness of a lifetime's honest work still in every line of her. And she looked around at the council that had never once looked at her when she poured its wine, and she spoke. "I never schemed for any of this," she said. "I begged him to send me back to the kitchens on the very night it happened. Most of you were in the hall to hear me do it. I am not a witch, and I have no wish for anyone's seat, and I did not want to be standing here today any more than most of you want to see me. But I will not stand in front of you and let you name the thing I am a shame and a danger, because my grandmother died an old woman still hiding, still afraid, still keeping me alive to carry it, and somewhere this winter I decided that I am finished being ashamed of the very thing she gave her whole frightened life to save." She looked around at them, one lord at a time, unhurried, unblinking. "You wanted a Luna who would make the North stronger. Every one of your 12 daughters was raised and sent to do exactly that. Well, I can bring you back the wolf singers of Heifel, that this land drowned and forgot. I can raise up a whole generation of children who can walk into the wild packs of the deep hills unarmed and bring them gently into the fold, so that Heifel never again wastes the strength of a hard winter fighting its own wolves for the passes, the way it has wasted it in every hard winter of your lives and your father's lives. That is the dowry I bring to this seat. It is worth more than the 12 holds laid end to end, and every man in this room knows that it is, or none of you would be half so frightened of one kitchen girl." She let that settle, then she added quietly, "Or you can send me back down to the kitchens. I poured good wine for a great many years. I'll not want for the work." There was a very long silence in the council chamber of Verath. And then Ussold of the Marches stood up. She had been one of the 12, the tall, cool, gray-eyed one who had asked me about the hungry passes and been the only one of them to ask me anything real, who had, for reasons of her own, stayed on at Verath through the winter in a quiet advisory place at the council's edge that I had never quite got round to examining. She rose from her seat, and she looked slowly around at her fellow lords, and she said, dry as a stick, "Well, she's asked a better question standing there in a plain gown than the whole pack of us managed in a full year of arranging silk, and I've watched her sing a litter alive that my own best handler gave up for dead." She turned to face Harn directly. "I say the wolf had the right of it from the start, and the wolf has never in living memory been wrong, and I for one am done pretending an old gray beast has poorer judgment than a room full of frightened men." And she inclined her head to Nell, not a full bow. Ussold of the Marches gave no man or woman a full anything without a hard reason, and sat back down. But it was Harn who knelt. In the end, and to his lasting and everlasting credit, it was Harn. He was a proud man and a cautious one, and he had staked a full year of his life and the whole of his standing on being right about the choosing, and he was not, at the bottom of it all, a stupid man, nor a cruel one. He had seen the same things I had seen all that winter. He rose from his seat at the head of the council slowly, an old man's rising, and he crossed the floor. And the councillor who had called Nell a servant and a pourer of wine, and a kitchen witch went down, with some difficulty, upon one knee in front of the last wolf singer of Heifel. And the rest of the council, one lord and one lady at a time, followed him down onto the cold stone, until the whole assembled power of the north was kneeling in that chamber to the girl I had found at the edge of my hall. Nell looked out at the kneeling council of the north with an expression of such total, undisguised astonishment that I had to turn my face away toward the window to keep from laughing aloud. Because she still, even now, after the whole of that long winter, did not truly believe that any of it was happening to her. And I loved her so much in that single moment that it frightened me down to the bone. She chose me in the spring. She never made a ceremony of it, which is precisely how I knew, past any doubt, that it was real. We were up on the walls at first light. She still woke before the sun. She always would to the last morning of her life, watching the wild pack move across the thawing hills below Verath, the snow going gray and rotten in the hollows, the first hard green pushing up along the south-facing slopes. And one of the great wild wolves, far down the hill, lifted its head and saw her small figure standing against the pale sky on the wall, and it cried out that long, rising, aching call that goes up the spine of anyone born in the north. And the whole pack took it up after it, 40 voices, 50, rolling up the greening hills to the girl, who had once been made to swear on her life never to let a single one of them come to her where any soul could see. She stood and she listened to it a long while, saying nothing, her dark hair loose in the thin spring wind. Then she put her hand into mine, the way she had that first night on the flags of my hall, of her own will without being asked, and she said, without turning to look at me, still watching the wolves, "You told me that night that I could stay only until I knew you, that when I knew you I could choose or not." A breath, the wolves sang below us. "I know you now, Verk." "You're certain," I said, and my voice was not entirely my own. "There is still gold enough set by and the whole of the wide north to spend it in, if you'd sooner be no one after all. The offer I made you that night I made in earnest. It stands yet." She laughed that low, warm, unguarded laugh I had waited the whole of a winter to hear come easily, and she turned at last and looked up at me. "I was never no one, Verk," she said. "That was only ever the lie my grandmother dressed me in to keep me breathing. I just learned young how to wear it well enough that the whole world believed it." Her eyes, the deep brown of turned earth, held mine, steady as they had been from the first. "But I would rather be yours if the offer stands." The offer stood. God knows the offer stood. We are old now, she and I old enough at least. And I have set all of this down, in my own hand, in the long quiet evenings, because a king's true story is so rarely the one the songs decide to keep, and I find I would like this one kept truly. The wolf singers of Heifel are no longer a legend told to frighten and delight children in the dark. There are 11 of them living now, small and fierce and bright-eyed, 3 of our own blood, and 8 taken in off the hard roads of the north, orphans and hidden children of the scattered line, drawn to Vereth one by one over the years the way iron is drawn to a lodestone. They walk in among the wild packs of the deep hills unarmed and unafraid, exactly as the old songs always swore their kind once did. And in 20 years no hard winter has been wasted in fighting our own wolves for the passes, and the north is fat and quiet and safe, in a way it had entirely forgotten how to be. The 12 hold still send their daughters to Verath, but now they send them to be taught the old songs, and it is Nell herself who teaches them, patiently. In the warm kitchens she never entirely consented to leave, and more than one proud great lord has stood in a doorway and watched his prouder daughter learn a little humility at the hands of the wolf singer who once poured his wine at a feast and was not seen, and has gone home a quieter and a better man for the watching of it. Seraphine of Dunkero married a lord of the eastern holds within the year, and is, by all accounts, contented, and has never once come back to Verath, which I do not hold against her. Amariel of the Ashwood leads her father's hunt still, and his whole hold besides now that he is old, and rules it fiercely and well, and sends us a haunch of venison every midwinter with a note that grows less cold each year. And Ussold of the Marches never went home at all. She sits at the head of my council these many years, where Harn once sat, and she asks the hard questions about the hungry passes that no one else will ask, and she and Nell between them have done more for the ordinary folk of the north than the whole long line of my forefathers managed with all their armies. And I have long since stopped pretending I do not know exactly how fortunate a king I am, to be ruled a little by 2 such women. Ash is gone. He went in his sleep, 4 winters past, in the solar with the good morning light across the floor, with his great white head laid across her feet where it had lain nearly every single day of the 15 good years he gave us after the night of the choosing. We buried him under the south wall, where the wild pack could come down and keep him company, and Nell sang the old song over him, the one her grandmother sang, the one that called a dying she-wolf back across the threshold of death, and the whole wild pack came down out of the greening hills and sat in a wide silent ring in the last of the snow to listen, and not one of them moved so much as a muscle until she was done. He crossed a whole crowded, blazing hall to lie down at her feet on the one night in my life it mattered most, when I was too proud and too tired and too long-guarded to see the truth standing right in front of me pouring the wine. He was wiser than my entire council of lords put together. I have said as much, out loud and in public more than once, and old Harn, who is also gone from us now, and whom I find I miss a great deal more than I would ever once have believed possible. Harn used always to bow his gray head at that and quietly agree. There is one thing I do, still, most evenings, that no one but Nell has ever understood or needed to. When the hall is full and warm and the wine is going round, I look for whoever is pouring it, some quiet soul at the far edge of the bright room, doing good work well and asking nothing of anyone, unseen by every proud and easy face at the crowded tables. And I have a cup brought to them, and a seat found for them nearer the fire, and I make certain that someone looks them in the eye and thanks them by name before the night is out. Because I very nearly missed her. That is the whole of what I have learned, at the end of a long life and a good one, better than I ever had any right to expect. That the one person your whole heart has been waiting for, all your cold and splinted years, may well be the one that no one in the crowded room has troubled even once to see, standing quietly at the edge of it all with the wine, keeping something small alive out of her own share, asking for nothing. And that it may take a wiser creature than you to cross the whole length of the floor and lie down at her feet before you finally lift your head and look. I looked in the end. It took an old gray wolf to make me do it, but I looked and there she was and had been the whole time, and I have thanked God and that good old beast sleeping under my south wall every single day of my life since.